Hi and welcome to section 2.2 for Econ 1 on the AQA exam board. What will we see today? Today we'll be looking at the function of demand, elasticities and price elasticity of demand. So let's first start by looking at the function of demand. Demand is a function of P1 ... Y, T and E, whereby P is price, P1 ... is the price of other goods, Y is income, T is taste, and E is expectations. A change in price results in a movement along a demand curve, and a change in any of the other factors results in a shift in the demand curve. Today we're going to be focusing on what effect a change in price has. Another key part of today is looking at elasticities. But first, what is an elasticity? Elasticities measure the percentage change in one variable with respect to a percentage change in another variable. We have a variety of different elasticities relating to demand. One elasticity is price elasticity of demand, which we will be looking at in more detail later on in this video. Another elasticity is cross elasticity of demand, and a final one is income elasticity of demand. We'll be looking at these bottom two in more detail in the following videos. Like I said earlier, a change in price results in a movement along a demand curve. Demand is downward sloping, and we learnt this in section 2.1. This means that as the price rises, the quantity demanded falls, and as the price falls, the quantity demanded rises. So price and quantity move in opposite directions. They are negatively correlated. So here we have two demand curves. We have one demand curve on the left, which is quite steep, and another demand curve on the right, which is flatter, i.e. it has a lower gradient. For both the demand curves, we're going to have an initial price of P1, which leads to Q1 being demanded on both the left and the right diagram. We are now going to reduce the price in the market on the left from P1 to P2. This results in a movement along the demand curve, and a greater quantity is demanded. At price P2, Q2 is demanded, which is greater than Q1. On the market on the right, with the flatter demand curve, we're going to have the same fall in price from P1 to P2. This results in a movement along the demand curve and a greater quantity being consumed. The increase in quantity demanded in the market on the right with the flatter demand curve is much greater than the increase in quantity demanded on the left diagram. Therefore, the shape of the demand curve determines what is the change in quantity demanded when there is a change in the price. We can use price elasticity of demand to quantify these changes. Price elasticity of demand measures the responsiveness of quantity demanded with respect to a change in price. It is worked out using the following formula. Price elasticity of demand equals percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Let's have an example. Suppose that Apple decides to reduce the price of their iPads from £400 to £350. They predict that the sales of iPads will increase from 200,000 per month to 275,000 per month. From these figures in the question, we can then work out the price elasticity of demand for iPads. We do this by using the formula on the other page, which is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Let's first work out the percentage change in quantity demanded. We find this out by doing the new quantity demanded, which is 275,000, minus the old quantity demanded, which is 200,000, divided by the original quantity demanded, which is 200,000. This gives us a percentage of 37.5%. We can then work out the percentage change in price, which is the new price minus the old price, divided by the old price, which gives us a percentage decrease of 12.5%. We then find the value for price elasticity of demand by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded by the percentage change in price, which is 37.5% divided by minus 12.5%, which gives us a value for price elasticity of demand of minus 3. But what does a price elasticity demand value of minus 3 actually mean? Here we have a number line going from minus infinity to 0. Usually the value for price elasticity of demand will be negative. This is because of the negative correlation between price and quantity demanded. So as the price increases, i.e. a positive change in price, the quantity demanded value decreases, negative. And a positive divided by a negative gives you a negative, which is why price elasticity of demand is negative. Our number line also has the value of minus 1 on it. This is because minus 1 is a key value in determining what price elasticity of demand means. A value for price elasticity of demand between minus 1 and 0 means that demand is inelastic. With inelastic demand, the percentage change in quantity demanded is smaller than the percentage change in price. An inelastic demand curve would be fairly steep. Here we have an inelastic demand curve with an initial price in the market of P1, and at a price of P1, quantity Q1 is demanded. There then is an increase in the price in this market to P2. The increase in price from P1 to P2 causes less to be demanded in the market. Q2 is now demanded. The percentage change in price is greater than the percentage change in quantity demanded, and you can see that from the diagram. The value for price elasticity of demand also tells us what happens to firms' revenues when they change their prices. With inelastic demand, a firm's revenue can increase by the firm raising their prices. A decrease in their prices would reduce a firm's revenue. Initially, our firm set a price of P1, which led to Q1 being consumed in the market. We work out revenue by doing P1 times Q1, which gives us the blue square. When firms increase their price, less is being consumed in the market. So at a price of P2, the firm's revenue is the orange rectangle. We can compare the revenue for firms at the different prices. When the price rises to P2, firms lose the area that is red, but they gain the area that is green. The green area is greater than the red area, which means that the revenue for firms increases. Therefore, there is an incentive for firms to increase their price when they have inelastic demand, because they can increase their revenue. So with inelastic demand, an increase in the price would increase revenue for firms, and a decrease in price would decrease revenue for firms. So now let's go back to our timeline. A value for price elasticity of demand between minus infinity and minus 1 means that demand is elastic. With elastic demand, the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. The demand curve for elastic demand would be flatter. Here we have an elastic demand curve. Suppose that the price in the market is initially P1. This will lead to a quantity consumed of Q1. Then the price in this market falls from P1 to P2. This causes a greater quantity to be consumed in the market, Q2 rather than Q1. With elastic demand, firms can increase their revenue by reducing their prices. So when the price was P1 in the market, the area for revenue is the blue area, because that's P1 times Q1. Then firms decrease their prices, and the area for revenue at price P2 is the orange rectangle. We can compare the revenue generated at price P2 with the revenue generated at price P1. When the price is P2, the red area in revenue is lost, but the green area is gained. This green area is greater than the red area, meaning that the revenue for firms rises when the price is full for elastic demand. If firms were to raise their price with elastic demand, their revenue would fall. This is the opposite to the inelastic demand case. A value for price elasticity of demand of -1 means that demand is unitary elastic. This is where the percentage change in quantity demanded is exactly the same as the percentage change in price, only they have opposite values, i.e. one is a plus and one is a negative. With unitary elastic demand, a firm's revenue will be constant when the price changes. The demand curve with unitary elastic demand is fairly curved, and the revenue at P1 will be exactly the same as the revenue at P2. We then have some extreme cases for price elasticity of demand. Let's have the first example when price elasticity of demand is a value of 0. With a value of 0, we say that demand is perfectly inelastic. This means that the quantity demanded does not change at all with a change in price. We get this value because the percentage change in quantity demanded is 0, and when we divide this by the percentage change in price, 0 divided by any number will be 0, which is why price elasticity of demand for perfectly inelastic demand is 0. With perfectly inelastic demand, the demand curve is vertical. With a price of P1, a quantity of Q1 will be demanded. When the price falls to P2, the same quantity will be demanded. Q2 is the same as Q1. The quantity demanded would still be Q1 or Q2 if the price was to rise above P1. So whatever the price is in the market, the same quantity will be demanded. So let's take the other extreme case when the value for price elasticity of demand is -infinity. When we have a value for price elasticity of demand of -infinity, we say that demand is perfectly elastic. This means that the consumers will only demand the good at a certain price. So here we have our perfectly elastic demand curve, and consumers will only demand this good at a price of P1. The quantity that will be consumed in the market is dependent on supply. Suppose that the supply curve in the market was S1. This would lead to an equilibrium with a price of P1 and a quantity demanded of Q1. If the supply curve was to shift outwards from S1 to S2, this would lead to a greater quantity being demanded in the market, but the price in the market would still be P1. So to summarise our price elasticity of demand value meanings, a value for PED of -infinity means that demand is perfectly elastic. A value between -infinity and -1 means that demand is elastic. With elastic demand, a fall in the price increases revenue, and an increase in the price decreases revenue. Then we have a value for price elasticity of demand of -1, which means that demand is unitary elastic. This means that the revenue is constant as the price increases or decreases. A value for PED between -1 and 0 means that demand is inelastic, and with inelastic demand, a rise in the price would increase revenue, and a fall in the price would decrease revenue. And a value of price elasticity of demand of 0 means that demand is perfectly inelastic. As we move along this value line, the gradient of our demand curve becomes steeper. But why do we actually care about price elasticity of demand? Well, firms can know revenue consequences of price changes, which we have discussed. Also, when we have an indirect tax, price elasticity of demand can tell us who pays more of the tax. Is it firms or consumers? And the value for price elasticity of demand and the slope of the demand curve determines this. Price elasticity of demand is also useful for price discrimination, which we will see more later on in this course. but price discrimination is essentially when firms charge different prices to different individuals.